We now welcome to Larry King Live the most famous name in American comic book history. The writer Stan Lee, the co-founder and chairman and chief creative officer of Stan Lee Media, chairman emeritus of Marvel Media, member of the editorial board of Marvel Comics, consultant to DC Comics. He has a remarkable deal with them. And it's a great pleasure to watch. Why do you wear those glasses all the time? You wear them to sleep.
You know, the funny thing is, I started wearing these years ago. I don't even remember why. And when people do caricatures of me, they always have the glasses. And it's become like a little trademark.
But don't you see the world through dark eyes?
No, it's great. I don't see any of the imperfections. Everything is muted and gentle. It's lovely wearing these tinted glasses.
Let's trace the career of Stan Lee. All of us as kids read them. What made you make a career of comics?
Greed. They were paying me for it. No, actually, when I started, I applied for a job in this publishing company. I saw an ad. I didn't know they published comics. I thought it was a real publishing company. When I saw they wanted me to work in the comic book department, I figured, hey, why not? I'll get some experience for a while, and then I'll get into the real world. I'm still waiting to get out into the real world.
You hit it off right away, is that it?
Yeah, yeah.
What did you like about Zap, Boom, Blam? I'll get you, you dirty curd.
Man, you're bringing it all back to me. That sounded good. I loved working with these talented artists. I always wanted to be an artist when I was a kid. I used to draw. And suddenly I saw people who could draw 1,000 times better than I ever could. And I was giving them the stories, they were drawing them, and it was a collaboration that was so exciting to discuss a story and a few days later to see it all drawn on boards, then a month later to see it in a book, and to know that kids are reading these and enjoying them.
Were good comics then well drawn?
Comics were always well drawn for the time. For example, the early Supermen didn't look anything like they look today, but in those days, the artwork was good for what it was. It had a lot of freedom, you know what I mean? And it was just the way they thought of it, and they put it down. They were fun to read. As the months and years went by, the artwork has gotten much more sophisticated now.
Now, why did we like it so much? Why as kids, I mean, we had movies, we didn't have television, admitted that, but comic books are as popular as ever, right? They're comic book store. Why do we like reading it, boom, ba-boom, ba-boom?
Think of it. Why do you like movies? Because you're seeing pictures and they're moving. Comics don't move, but you have a story and you're looking at the pictures at the same time. They're easy to read, they're quick to read. You can fold the thing up, put it in your pocket, you can share it with a friend, you can carry it with you, you can save them and collect them and read them all at once. It's just a nice form of entertainment for kids, and today even older people enjoy them.
And now, your career with Marvel Comics, you and Marvel are associated, that you think of Lee, you think of Marvel. Was that who you started with?
Well, it wasn't called Marvel at the time, but I think when I started it was called Timely Comics. They changed the name a lot over the years, but it's always been the same company.
Was that due to Captain Marvel?
No, actually, I changed the name to Marvel after we started with the Fantastic Four, the Hulk, the X-Men, Spider-Man. I saw we were onto something, and at that time I think we were called Atlas Comics, and I decided let's change the name and get something representative of the company. The first book they had ever published when I started to work there was called Marvel Mystery Comics. So out of sentiment, I said, let's call the company Marvel Comics. I wasn't thinking of Captain Marvel at all.
Your most famous person, we'll deal with what you're doing now in cyberspace and like, is Plastic Man, right?
No, Spider-Man.
Spider-Man. Did you have Plastic Man too?
No, that was DC.
But you're now with DC too. You're controlling the world.
No, I'm not. They had asked me, just for fun, if I would do a series for DC, take their more popular characters and do them as if I had created them. What would they be like? Well, nobody could say no to an offer like that. It sounds like such fun. So I'm now going to do Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, and the rest as though they didn't exist and I had just thought them up. How would I do them? I have no idea how I'm going to do them, but I'll figure something out.
And I know you're coming big to the internet and all over the world. Stan Lee in cyberspace. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about Spider-Man on this edition of Larry King Live, right after this. One thing great about this business, I love interviewing children. Stan Lee is one of those. He's with us. He never grew up. Spider-Man, how did it come about?
Well, I had already done the Fantastic Four and the Hulk, and we were on a roll, and we decided, let's get another hero. And I thought to myself, okay, but the thing with a superhero that you have to get is a unique superpower. Well, we already had somebody who was the strongest guy in the world, somebody who could fly and so forth. I was thinking, what else is left? Then it occurred, I've told this story so often it might even be true. I can't remember. But I was sitting and I saw a fly crawling on the wall. And I said, wow, suppose a person had the power to stick to a wall like an insect. So I was off and running, and I thought, what'll I call him? I tried Mosquito Man, that didn't have any glamour. Insect Man, that was even worse. I went down the line, and I got to Spider-Man. It sounded mysterious and dramatic, and lo, a legend was born.
Was it a hit right away?
Yes. And I'll tell you something funny about that. Nobody wanted me to do it. My publisher, when I suggested the idea, he said, that's the worst thing I ever heard of.
Why?
People hate spiders. You can't call a hero Spider-Man. When I said I wanted him to be a teenager, that's where he started, he said to me, you don't understand, Stan. A teenager can only be a sidekick. He can't be the hero.
Robin.
Then when I said I want him to have a lot of personal problems and nothing ever goes right from, he said, Stan, don't you know what a hero is? So he wouldn't let me do it. I had to wait till later. We had a book we were going to drop. And when you do the last issue of a book, nobody cares.
You call them books, right?
Well, I call it a comic book, yeah. Nobody cares what you put into it. So I featured Spider-Man on the cover. And I forgot about it. Well, a month later, the sales figures came in. It had been our biggest seller. So my publisher came to me and said, Stan, do you remember that character that we both liked so much, Spider-Man? Why don't you do a series? And that's how it happened.
Who came up with the way he looks?
Steve Ditko. Steve designed the character.
The colors?
Everything about the costume. And he also gave it such personality, the way, you know, it's an interesting story. Jack Kirby was probably the greatest comic book artist around. And I worked with him. We collaborated on so many strips, the Fantastic Four, the Hulk, the X-Men. And I wanted Jack originally to do the Spider-Man, but I didn't want Spider-Man to look heroic. I wanted him to be just a typical nebbishy kind of guy. And I mentioned that to Jack, but Jack was so used to drawing Captain America and characters like that. When he gave me the first couple of pages, I said, no, you got him looking too heroic. So I gave the strip to Steve. It didn't matter to Jack. Nobody knew it would be a big strip, and Jack was busy doing all the other books. Steve was just perfect for it. He got that feeling of an average guy who turned into a hero and still had problems.
Do artists make a lot of money?
Now they do, I think, yeah.
Did you ever want to do a comic strip for a newspaper?
All the time. I finally got the chance. I wanted to do Spider-Man. In fact, the syndicates asked me to do Spider-Man, but I couldn't figure out how to do it because it's so different. In a paper, you've only got 3 panels a day.
4 sometimes.
Well, it used to be 4. Now there's
3.
so little space, it's either 2 or 3 panels a day for an action strip. How do you get a fight scene in 3 panels and continue it the next? You know, you punch a guy in 1 panel, and the next day in the first panel he falls down. How do you keep up the suspense? So it took until I could figure out a way to do it. Years later, in 1977, we started Spider-Man for King Features, and I'm happy to say he's still going.
Are 95% of the readers of comic books of the action variety male?
Yeah, they are.
Boys.
They are. I don't know the exact proportion.
What comic
but
books
most
do
of them.
girls buy? Girls must have bought Wonder Woman.
There was a time when romance comics were very big.
remember them,
yeah, and the girls were buying them. And in those days, they worked in trends. One year, it was the romance trend. Then after that, it would be westerns or horror books. And we lost the girls. They have not ever really come back in force. Sure, they read some of them read Wonder Woman and some others, and we're desperately trying to capture the girls. But the superhero feel, it's the same thing. How many girls would rather see Arnold Schwarzenegger films than a romance film, you know?
What constitutes, before we move to cyberspace and all you're doing now, websites, webicides, the accuser, the webisodes, the accuser, the drifter, what constitutes a hero?
I guess a guy who just does good things and is willing to take chances to help other people.
Good, right? He only wants to help.
But not 100% good, because then he's an unrealistic hero.
That
to
man
me,
was dark, right?
Yeah, no, he didn't start out dark. He became dark after a while. A fellow named Frank Miller did a series called Batman the Dark Knight, and that gave him a whole new mystique, and they've been using it ever since. But basically, to me, a hero has to be somebody who will sacrifice or will take great chances to help others, but still have human traits, still not be perfect. When they become perfect, they become dull.
Mighty Mouse was a hero. We're bringing him back.
We're trying to, yeah.
By the way, people like Steven Spielberg have publicly acknowledged a debt to Stan Lee, our guest, for helping create their young minds as they grew. How do you prevent writing down?
You just don't do it. People have said to me all my life, or all my writing life, who do you write for? And I've said, I don't have an audience in mind. I write for myself. I write stories that I think I would like to read. I try to write them clearly enough that a youngster could understand and appreciate it.
Now, you can't write, it has to fit into panels, right?
Well, in a comic strip, yes.
That's what I mean.
Yes. Right now I'm doing the animation on the web, but for comic strips, you have to write dialogue that'll fit into the panels.
On the web, they're speaking so they can speak long.
But it's the same problem on the web because of the fact that the bandwidths are not as big as they should be on your computer. The dialogue has to be very short. And
Really?
Originally, I wanted our webisodes to be a half hour in length. Right now, they're only about 4 minutes in length because, again, it takes too long to download. So technically, as the computers get better and better somehow, or the bandwidths get easier to accommodate, we'll be able to make them longer. But we have the same brevity problem now.
Most 77-year-olds are turned off by a computer.
Oh, I love it.
You are like a childlike with this.
Yeah. Well, when the computers first came out, I was still doing comics, and the idea of using a computer to do your writing, where you could correct something with a stroke and you didn't have to paste things down and retype things, so I fell in love with it then. Then when the internet came along, to be able to contact people around the world and use email, and I mean, it's fascinating. The internet is going to be, and this is nothing profound for me, everybody must know it, the most powerful medium of communication and entertainment that the world has ever known. And what we did with Marvel Comics years ago, that's what I want to do with Stanley.net right now. I want to make that the greatest entertaining site that you could find.
And do you have people all over the world handling you and dealing with you? Do you have to draw different type characters for Hong Kong than you do for Bulgaria?
But what we did, we have the first global team of superheroes. Our strip, the Seventh Portal, which is now being worked on for a motion picture, I might add. But the Seventh Portal features a hero from India, from Japan, from Brazil, from Germany, from America, and one country I'm not thinking of at the moment. So it's the first global team of superheroes. And then, when they don't work as a team, each one will have an adventure in his or her own land, and those will be separate stories, and they'll be geared for that particular audience.
One of the films everybody's looking forward to this summer is X-Men. Is that in this venue?
X-Men is
basically a comic book
great.
on the screen?
It's the first Marvel character that's going to be a big budget movie. I might add that I have a walk-on role in there.
You're in X-Men.
And yeah, and I'm hoping that if the Academy has a nomination for the best walk-on, I hope that I'll qualify.
Is Spider-Man coming to the big screen?
Yeah, next year.
Big screen movie.
It's in the works now for 2001, and I might add that most of our other characters, the Hulk is in the works at Universal.
Yeah, that's right, I heard.
Yeah, Daredevil, all of them. There's going to be a sequel to Blade. It's hard to keep up with them all.
Are these for young kids? Is that what they're aiming at?
I'm hoping they're for the whole family.
I'll do that. Therefore, they can't be. You can't get into sex in these things, can you? Or can you?
Well, again, I don't know. That's really up to the movie studio.
You don't
I
in
hope they're
comic
not
books
going to.
ever.
Pardon me?
You don't in comic books or on
We
your
try
website.
not to. Yeah.
Because do you ever believe the concept that you contribute to violence?
No. I must say, in all honesty, I love action, and so do our readers. We love action stories. I think there is such a difference between action and violence. I don't like stories that deal with torture. I don't like stories with children or women being mistreated in any way. But you like a story of a good guy fighting a bad guy. I mean, we grew up on that. Kids would play cops and robbers, cowboys and Indians. It's a natural thing.
Superheroes rarely kill people, though, right?
They shouldn't.
They should.
They shouldn't
right?
kill an innocent person.
No, never kill an innocent
Not
person.
in my
right.
story, they won't.
Do you have a favorite
A favorite superhero?
that you didn't do?
Oh, no. Well, Tarzan, maybe. James
Well,
Bond.
now you're updating Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman, right, for DC.
No, not updating them. I'm just doing them in a different way. One story of each. It's not going to be a steady thing. I'm not doing a series. My heart still belongs to Marvel. It was just an offer I couldn't resist.
We'll be back with our remaining moments with the brilliant, energetic, ever-young Stan Lee right after this. With Stan Lee, well, comic books are down in sales, though, right? I think.
Yeah.
But about 40%, I think, in the
I
last
don't know the
decade.
percentage, but one of the reasons I think isn't a lack of interest. There are less places to buy comics. There are less comic book stores. And where years ago you could buy a comic book in any corner store that sold magazines and candy.
Oh, I'd run down for the new, wait for the new issue. I knew when they came out.
Yeah,
I
but
had
those-
subscriptions.
But those places don't exist anymore. And that's the big problem. Not that kids don't want them, but where do you get them?
Can you predict where the internet is going with this? What's it going to be like in 10 years?
Oh man, the internet is going to be everything. I think there will be one screen, whether it's a computer screen or a television screen or a little handheld thing, but it's going to have your television programs, your internet webisodes and shows. It's going to have your telephone. It'll all be one thing, and it, I believe, will all come under the heading of the internet. And we're going to be linked with everything all over the world. We're on the verge of the most exciting era in communications that you can imagine.
You feel sorry that you're 77?
Sometimes, because I'd love to have another 100 years instead of perhaps the other 25 or 30 that I do have.
Of course, you want to see.
I'd
You want
love
to
to
be
see
part
it,
of all this
absolutely.
and see what's happening with it.
But I have a feeling we'd feel this way if it was 100 years from now or 200 years from now. Life is so exciting, and every day there's something new and thrilling coming along. And it seems to be happening faster and faster as science gets more and more advanced.
Do you ever have a character you expected would do Sacco and bombed?
No, I just had only one character in my life bombed. I wanted to get a villain. Jack Kirby and I were looking for a villain. We had a fast deadline. All I could think of was a name, Diablo. I thought that sounded like a great villain. Jack said great. The minute I said the name, he had drawn somebody who looked great, evil. But I didn't know what to do with him. We didn't know who he was, all we had was a name. Somehow we got a story out of it. I don't remember the story. I hated the story. I never used Diablo again, and that was the only time I really did something that was not what I thought was good.
A good comic book story has conflict, hero, villain, saving someone usually.
You know what it is? A good comic book story has what any good adventure story has, except it's illustrated. That's all. But it has to have all the elements: good characterization, believable dialogue, and exciting situations that make you want to go to the
Believable
next page.
dialogue, zap, bam, whap.
Now those are sound effects, you silly person. That's not the dialogue. The dialogue has to
I've
be
come to save you.
it has to be like you and me talking. Well, it can't be that brilliant, but it has to be something like that.
Do you like, the artist draws the circle too. What's that called?
The
Where
balloon?
The balloon.
You mean the dialogue balloon?
No, is that what it's called?
It's
the
called
thing
the
that things are
dialogue
written
balloon,
in, right?
Yeah, it's a dialogue balloon, as differentiated from the caption, which is usually a rectangle,
On the bottom.
or the top, as the case
Do you
may be.
read the comic pages?
You mean in the newspapers?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. I can't begin my day without reading the LA Times comic page, because I live in LA. If I lived in another city... it
But
would
you
be-
are a comic page reader.
Yeah, I love
Did
them.
you have the same appreciation for Peanuts? As I
Oh, yes, Peanuts was wonderful. I mean, I knew Charles Schultz. In fact, I have the only oil painting that he ever did in the world. It was auctioned years ago for the benefit of the USO. Joan Crawford was the auctioneer, and they had Dick Tracy and Terry and the Pirates and Peanuts. All of the top
As
cartoonists
oil paintings.
did these pop art paintings, they were called. And I bid for Charlie Schultz Peanuts, and I got it. And I wouldn't part with that. It's about this big, and it shows Snoopy on top of the doghouse lying there, and Charlie Brown standing next to him with a little bowl of food. And the doghouse slats are actual wood that Charles Sparky pasted right on the canvas.
People in the cartoon business are all a little wacko, right? I mean, to be honest, the
I think
writers
we're
and
the sanest of all. I think it's your average person. We are trying to bring sanity to the rest of the world, and it's a tough battle. It really is.
No, you're for order out of chaos.
I think we're for more chaos, but orderly chaos.
How important is the color?
Oh, very important, sure. The more color you can get and the brighter color you can get, the more exciting it looks and the more pleasing it is to the eye. Actually, what we're for at stanlee.net, we want to be a little cinder in the eye of the establishment. I just thought of that. I think it's great. I've got to remember
We'll
that.
put that somewhere. You're a devil.
Love being here.
Stanley at stanlee.net. The future is here, and we have seen it. Oh, as Puck used to say, we have seen the enemy, and it is us. We thank you very much for joining us. We thank our guests earlier as well. Have a great rest of the weekend for Stanley and the whole crew here in Los Angeles. Good night.